Welcome to the Sports Science Dudes. I'm your host, Dr. Jose Antonio, with my co-host, Dr. Tony Ricci. He's having technical issues. Hopefully he'll join us. You can find our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Rumble. Our special guest today is, and I know I'm going to anglicize his name, Roman Fomin, PhD. He is the Senior Director of Performance Science at UFCPI, UFC Performance Institute. Dr. Fomin is a leading expert in sports physiology and sports science, with over 2 decades of experience dedicated to optimizing the performance of elite athletes, including Olympians, top-tier professional competitors. Since joining the UFCPI nearly 7 years ago, he's been there the whole time. He's been leading the sports science team where he integrates cutting-edge science, advanced technology, and innovative methodologies to improve the health, well-being, and performance of the UFC athletes. He's also the architect, and this is something we're going to talk about, what he calls Windows of Trainability concept, a groundbreaking approach embedded in portable technology that he developed. This technology has been widely utilized by high performance teams and athletes worldwide to maximize training efficiency and performance. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Roman Fomin to the Sports Science Dudes. And unless Tony figures out his technical difficulties, it'll be you and I, which is completely fine. Now, before we logged on, sort of talking about your history, a lot of students will come to me and they'll see your position and they'll see Charles Stull and they'll see Duncan French. And because I teach exercise science majors, they always want to know, well, first of all, let me backtrack. They always want what they think are glamorous positions. Oh, I want to coach NFL football. Oh, I want to coach the USA soccer team. Oh, I want to work for the NBA. Oh, I want to work for the UFCPI. How does one, because UFCPI, obviously everyone knows UFC, the UFC brand. How does one get to that position where you are in? And I know it's not glamorous because it's work. We all know it's work, work, work. But how do you get to that position where people, let's say at the UFC, even notices who you are?
First, thank you for introduction. And I really appreciate your invitation. I'm very glad to be on this podcast. And yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for this question. This question is not easy to answer. It's interesting how we define glamorous position. So,
well, people think your job is glamorous because it has UFC in front of it.
For sure, there is a brand. Also, UFC and MMA is a part of sport and sports industry. And sport, and this is what I love, is all about breaking barriers in human performance, setting up new records, and do what nobody did before. So it's about accomplishments, results, and performance. And this is what was my passion always. Before I was working with elite athletes from other sports, not necessarily related to combat sports. Now I'm working with MMA fighters. And it's always, for me, how can I help those athletes to do what nobody did before?
Right.
So setting up a new bar and do almost what was previously impossible possible. And another thing, so like let's put it this way. Let's imagine Roman Empire, Colosseum, gladiators.
Okay.
Yeah. People coming, watching performance, right? What gladiators did in the past, they fight and people get excited to watch this event. 2000 years later, what we have, we come, we sit, we watch how fighters, with no disrespect, but fighters fight to each other and they perform and we get excited. What can differentiate us living in this moment, in this period of time, versus gladiators and fans 2,000 years ago? This is not necessarily a rhetorical question I can answer. Science. we can prepare athletes who can perform at their best during event. On the same time, our methodology is systematic, is structured. We have nutrition, we have physical therapy, we have all of those puzzles, and science and scientific method, what we use as a key tool for our decision-making process, and what can help us to prepare top-level athletes who can set up new records and perform as nobody did before. And on the same time, we can save them from, or at least prevent or avoid injuries, illness, overtraining, and so on, and prolong their career. We can enjoy their performance for longer. This is, for me, what is glamorous. And I dedicated whole my life to help athletes and coaches to really build new level athletes using science, using physiology and my expertise.
Did you, when you came to this country, because you originally from Russia, did you think you wanted to work at the UFCPI? Was it even on the radar, or it was something that was more accidental, sort of right place at the right time, the right people? Which is it?
Actually, I was not thinking about UFC on that period of time of my life. Actually, I was thinking more about working in high tech. Because I have had already pretty extensive experience in research academic area. I was a head of neuromuscular physiology laboratory in Moscow. And I was working already with elite athletes, including Olympic teams. We supported them for preparation for Olympic Games and so on. And I was, on that moment of my career, I was thinking, I would like to develop actually technology or something like a tool that can help distribute my expertise and deliver my expertise to coaches, kind of automate certain knowledge and help athletes to get that information, or let's call this like physiological feedback or information from their body, and improve their training process and maximize their results. So I was thinking about connecting actually sports physiology with data science, with technology, with, if you want this word, sports engineering type of thing. And this is why I started working for a high-tech company.
Well, on that note, okay, let me ask you this. So training for the mixed martial arts, in my opinion, is the most difficult of all sports, mainly because you use all the energy systems. The skill sets are so different, whether you initially come in as a grappler, as a striker or whatnot, but you have to learn so many skill sets. And also someone's trying to beat you up. So there's that aspect. If you take that sport, which is exceedingly complex, and let's take a simple sport like running, let's take distance running. The average coach in distance running, they look at mileage, they look at speed, and really a lot of it is just based on, they ask them, hey, how do you feel? So we can either ramp up your mileage, ramp up the intensity, or decrease it. And then as you get closer to a track meet or a cross-country meet, you start tapering. For a sport like that, what technologies do you think would be valuable? Because let's face it, most track and cross-country coaches just do it old school. They figure out, okay, it seems like you could run 40 miles a week. You don't seem to get hurt. Okay, we're going to do X amount of high intensity interval training, X amount of hill training, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas MMA, much more complex, so many skill sets, the technology there versus the technology required in distance running. Could you comment on that?
So it's this question is very interesting.
Yeah.
Let me apply first physiological approach to answer this question. So first, every single sport has specific demands, and to be able to kind of deliver like highest result possible, we have to develop and build sport-specific adaptations inside our body, including different systems, muscular system, respiratory system, cardiac system, and so on. So basically, we're not just improving functions, we develop sometimes new structures. For example, if we want to improve running outcome or results in running, we have to increase number of mitochondria and their density inside muscles, right? So without those adaptations, it will be very difficult to run marathon in around 2 hours. So therefore, versus like if we compare running and MMA, definitely MMA has much more degrees of freedom, much more situations where you have to use quite complex adaptations across different systems. Plus, versus running, it is contact sport. So you are fighting against your opponent, and sometimes you are getting strikes landed on your body, on your head, and so on. So it's a contact sport, different demand. We have to develop those adaptations to be able to perform at the highest level. So, and we have to have a tool, measurement tool, that can track and help us monitor and track those adaptations. If I'm a coach and I'm working with you, applying certain amount of load, I have to understand if my load is specific enough and cause those adaptations. If my load is actually beneficial, you can take that load, your body can respond adequately and produce desired adaptations and useful outcome. Or my load is too high, and body, instead of getting benefits, actually is gonna suppress and inhibit those inputs or stimuli, and will try to avoid and actually might get some harmful effects because my load is inadequate. It's too high volume or too high intensity and so on. So therefore, technology, what we will be using, or tool, supposed to allow us to measure those adaptations. This is why we have to first define what adaptations we're tracking and what physiological system, and then apply adequate tool. So as an example, heart rate monitor can be very useful, and it is very useful tool for runners. For MMA fighters, it is also useful, but contribution of that system in their performance is probably not as high as for runners.
Correct.
So
yes.
Therefore, I would say, let's put this word, hashtag specificity. We have to consider specificity, because we, like in nutrition, you're not using a ruler to measure body weight. So we have specific tools for specific needs. In MMA, it's much more complex versus obviously running, to develop and use certain technologies because, of nature of sport.
So basically, you guys, so you're identifying the qualities first, and then a measurement tool accordingly. Like, I think in the cross-sectional analysis, you did a wonderful job with that. Isolated the necessary qualities, take a look at the qualities that maybe, you're looking for the commonalities or the norms, and then the test can be assigned accordingly. We don't have an instrument per se that measures all the qualities, but you determine the qualities and then look at the appropriate testing, right?
Yeah, right. Let me use one example. We developed our, what we call UFCPI energy systems profiling.
Yep.
And all of those tests, they're very different, like a classic approach. We're not using treadmill. Why? Because treadmill is a running specific tool. So we're using air bike, which is more closer, I would say. It's still non-sport specific in terms of MMA. However, it is closer because upper body and lower body, they both contribute. And our athletes, they're not running in the octagon with this particular pace, right? So we're trying to kind of stimulate and put load during tests, what we do, that will be closer to MMA or sport specific systems. So because we want to get response from those functional systems that contribute directly in their performance in the octagon, I mean. So, and we're trying to remove that noise or filter that noise and avoid those tests that not kind of directly support our decision making about sport specific tests.
With so many different technologies, though, how do you filter out sort of the redundant noise? I mean, because let's say you could measure everything if you wanted. You could, I mean, you could go back to the East Germans back in the 1970s. I remember as a kid watching video of them doing pricking the earlobe of East German swimmers to measure blood lactate, which is something Americans were not doing. So there's a lot of things you can do, but with limited time and limited resources, you sort of have to, well, actually, I don't know what you have to do, but I would think you sort of have to narrow it down to like, okay, these are like the top 3 most important technologies we can use. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. And we can differentiate laboratory-based technologies. For example, we have here Innovation Lab, and we're using, I would say, pretty expensive technologies. So they are not like accessible for like regular people, just because price. However, we can come with some light versions of those tests and with the technologies that can be used in, I would say, in a very simple way, kind of on the, let's do those tests on the budget. So there are some.
So what's the expensive version? What's the light version? Give me an example. I'm curious.
Yeah. So as an example, in our laboratory, in Innovation Lab, we're using metabolic card, portable metabolic card, and that price is, I'm not sure if I should disclose that.
Oh no, we just bought one, so
we just bought a new one. We can disclose it. You don't have to, Rome.
If there's something that's a lot cheaper and works just as well, we want it.
Yes, exactly. And actually, I can give you some possible solutions for that. So it allows us to see like systemic metabolism, right? Like global metabolic response without actually specifying what systems contributing to that response. Because what we measure is like oxygen consumption and CO2 removal at this point, like with a mask and so on. However, we want to see local muscular metabolism as well. And there are some tools, and I can use one of the example like near-infrared spectroscopy method that can be used to see like local muscular peripheral metabolism of oxygen saturation. And we found that some of responses on systemic level, they're matching or moving to the same direction versus muscle, like muscles and systemic metabolism, they respond in the same direction. And actually we can highlight like even specific time period during our, for example, VO2 max protocol, or like, oh, we can identify threshold pretty accurately. And then our coaches can use that technology and that tool for training purpose without using metabolic card, which is quite expensive. So this was one of the example how to identify thresholds, different threshold, metabolic thresholds, using cheaper technology.
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit on what you call the windows of trainability, that concept, windows of trainability?
Sure. Actually, it's an interesting story going back to 2013, beginning of 2014, and there is actually a handbook for coaches I wrote with my co-author about windows of trainability. We were thinking about how can we not just develop technology that allow coaches and athletes to measure and assess their readiness for upcoming training without actually that complex equipment, laboratory equipment. We were thinking how to make it in a simple way possible, using simple language like strength, power, endurance, communicating, using technology with coaches, with athletes, removing that complexity that always science using, and talk using mobile application with coaches and athletes, and on the same time deliver very useful physiological information about their recovery, their readiness for upcoming session, and helping them to manage training load, not just based on guessing or based on their subjective feeling, which is also valuable for sure, but it is by definition subjective. So we were trying to kind of bring objectivity and develop like technology that and tool that can help them say more confidently, okay, I'm recovered, I can do whatever I'm planning to do, or I'm not fully recovered, probably it's a good idea to reduce amount of load. So, and I used physiological approach here and my expertise in physiology, and I use word, I would say, adaptability, because when we talk about training, it's all about adaptability. I'm trying to improve my adaptability. I'm trying to develop something in my body in terms of structures, in terms of functions that allow me to perform more efficiently and produce higher output, and did what I was unable to do before. So, and I just converted this adaptability to trainability. Basically, this is my ability to receive training load in a certain volume and intensity, digest, process this training load, and develop those useful adaptations in my body, what I'm targeting to develop, what can improve my performance. And so I just converted this adaptability to trainability. And Windows actually came from the concept of like optimal period of time. So for example, you're recovered, you are ready to perform.
Right.
You are not recovered in a particular moment of time, you are not ready to perform. So therefore, okay, let's talk about Windows of trainability or Windows of the adaptability. This is optimal, or I would say ideal period of time when your body has completed all recovery processes, all adaptations has been built, and your body is ready for new stimuli.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about nutrition, this is pretty much the same concept. Optimal windows.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Because
Conceptually, it's awesome. I mean, if that its readiness is vital, because while challenging to measure, we are to some extent guessing, and half the time we're waiting for performance to decline to find out it's too late, right? And athletes are going to give you a subjective feeling or override that subjective feeling. So anything we could do to objectively quantify it, in my view, is of great value. I understand, Roman, there are struggles with that. I mean, it's not easy to look at what markers or what measurables will help us dictate that. But I mean, that's extremely valuable if it can be done in any capacity, because we essentially are guessing, especially with crazy training volumes of load these fighters undergo, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in concept, it's awesome.
And previously, athletes, they have had like a structured static training program plan, for example, for entire year. Like, okay, this is like what I'm planning to do, but where is actual feedback from the body?
Right.
So for example, you applied certain amount of volume or intensity, but your body is not capable to build those adaptations on time, and you want to put something on the top expecting higher output, but your body is in a different state. So therefore, instead of making those adjustments based on actual conversation with your body, you're just following static training program, which is not ideal.
Exactly.
It's like we were targeting autonomic nervous system and cardiac system on that period of time as foundational systems. If that system is not recovered, we can't really talk about other systems, because this is like your foundation. And this is why we developed that technology based on understanding how your autonomic regulation works, your heart, your kind of cardiac system, your basic foundational systems. And yeah, we want to make sure athletes get this information and their coaches on time, and they will be able to make right decision. Okay, my heart is recovered, I can do endurance type of work. My, for example, whatever, my nervous system, my brain is not fully recovered, I still can do endurance type of work, but it's probably not the best idea to do complex coordination type of work, or like, skill type of work. So one system is ready and available for training, and another system is not ready or partially ready or not available at all, depends. So we actually, first time, I would say, in the world, we developed technology that allowed to answer those questions. So more or less accurately. I'm not saying we were pretending to be like a gold standard, but still, yeah.
No, but it's quite valuable. And skeletal muscle rate of recovery is not consistent with nervous system, and so that's not a good indicator in and of itself either, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: when you're dealing with high-end athletes or elite athletes, and you see this, and you might see this across the board, where there are those who are just, they have so much talent that they may be, how should I put this? They may be less inclined to listen to a coach. You know, you see it in baseball, you see it in football, you're like, I'm so good. And these obviously are young males, usually you're dealing with. They're so good that, you know, what the hell do you know? You're just giving me all this science BS. And so that, what I'm trying to get to, the question of, are UFC athletes, so these are pros, are they even interested in this data? Because I'm sure they can't interpret it unless you sort of, you know, I guess feed it to them. But do they really care about this data? I know that's sort of a broad question, but I'm always interested, you know, how do athletes accept this stuff? Obviously, we're trying to help them, but what are your thoughts on that?
So we have super users, athletes who are not just interested, but they are diving in all details. They're so engaged, so involved, they're following our recommendations and so on. We have also athletes who are like getting this information, they're using this information, working with coaches when we provide that information to their teams, and they're involved as well. So we have athletes who are less interested, and they might get certain pieces of information they want to use, or they don't want to use at all. So we have like token using scientific language, like a normal distribution curve. So across all categories, we have athletes. We're trying to use the language, and language that can help them to understand complex science, and we're trying to connect those findings after testing here with their performance and what is happening or might be happening in the octagon in a real fight scenario. So because as soon as those two things get connected, for athletes and for us, actually, it's much easier to comprehend why metric is important, why this is not important, and so on. So it's like how I explain, for example, this energy systems profiling. We have 3 tests in the lab with complex scientific equipment, with metabolic cards, with heart rate monitors, and near-infrared spectroscopy, and so on. But I'm using this kind of let's say kind of scenario. Okay, we have 3 tests, and one test is designed to assess and measure your electrical engine. Like Tesla, you go from 0 to 100 miles pretty quick, fast, super fast. Okay, this is your first energy system, and we have tests for that, 6-second maximal effort test on air bike. Second is like your gasoline, like energy system number 2. which is
Right, right.
scientifically like anaerobic glycolytic system. Uh, Technically, it has aerobic component as well, but that's a different story.
Let's not
And
complicate it for them.
yeah. And this is gasoline. So you can still produce high intensity, not as high as Tesla, but you can sustain certain period of time, not very long at that maximal level. And third one is your diesel car. This is a VO2 max test, kind of longer test, and that engine is responsible for your recovery ability
Oh, that's
between
good. Good
rounds
analogy,
and
yeah.
so on. So electrical, gasoline, diesel, 3 engines, and your body is so beautiful, it has 3 of those.
Right.
And whole
like
idea is how you are using those 3 engines and how fast you can switch between those, because you might fight in the octagon and you need your Tesla engine, electrical engine. Then you go on the ground, you change your position. It's about wrestling. You have to quickly change your energy system to be able to produce still high output, but using different energy system. Or you have to go back, go to clinch or whatever you're planning to do. So you always, it's not just about what type of energy system you're using, it's about how fast you can switch those energy systems, involve them, use on the maximal level, then switch to another system, or working in a hybrid mode and deliver maximal output. And for them, it's like, oh, it makes sense. Okay, when I finish my first round, I need to recover fast, and I have 1 minute. Of course, I have to use my diesel, my oxidative aerobic system, and I want to activate that system as fast as possible to be able to produce faster recovery and then return back, and so on. So this is
That's a
how
good
we're trying to engage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
those are
that's a-
great analogies, and as professors and teachers, those are really good. I mean, they really help the fighter, digest what you're saying there, and I think it would motivate them to want to know the numbers. I also think you just created a whole new racing event. You get out of the Tesla car into a gas car and in a diesel truck.
Well,
Exactly.
well, Roman, what's interesting about that is there are guys, and I remember talking to Corey Peacock about this. He'll do max CO2 tests on some of these guys, and they're quite aerobically fit. I mean,
Mhm.
their numbers are high and whatnot. Yet, when they get into a fight, they
Mhm.
gas out real quickly.
Mhm.
So there's something else going on. They certainly have the aerobic capacity, the oxidative capacity,
Mhm.
but they get tired so easily. So what do you
Mhm.
tell that fighter? It's like, come on, you got to last at least 5 rounds. You can't die on the second or third round. What do you
Uh,
physiologically, how do you explain that to the fighter?
love this question. I love this question. This is why we stopped doing VO2 max test on the treadmill,
Mm,
Ah,
right?
yeah.
So because you might be amazing on a treadmill,
great
but you're
point.
not preparing for track and field event. You're not a candidate for US Olympic team in track and field. You're not preparing for running event, right? You're preparing for performance that is actually very well defined. It can be either 15 minutes or 25 minutes, 5 minutes each round, 1 minute rest. So therefore, you have to kind of train your energy systems around that format,
Mhm, mhm.
right? Also, we developed here our own methodology, trying to improve science as always. We never stop. So let's say you have three energy systems. However, every single engine has 4 different characteristics: power, efficiency, capacity, and let's call this flexibility or mobility. Flexibility, highly likely. We're still trying to figure it out, but
Okay.
it's more flexibility. So what is power? Power is like maximal amount of energy or work you produce using that energy system,
Yeah.
maximal. always 100% maximal, if we're talking about maximal power. Then capacity is like total amount of energy available in that particular engine. And efficiency is like how much work you can, or performance you can produce using this amount of available energy. This is rate. It's related to rate.
Right.
So you have to be efficient, and efficiency is hashtag efficiency. Efficiency is a key, not necessarily capacity, not necessarily power. Efficiency is a key for MMA fighters because their performance is not about, with all respect, and I will be first guy in the room who will say energy systems are important, but they have to be able, their brain's supposed to be available during fight. They have to process information, respond quickly. Their nervous system is supposed to be unlocked and available for performance. If they put themselves from physiology point of view in a very tough environment inside their body, acidic, toxic environment, and they overstimulate their physiology, their brain will be changing their focus from external to internal environment, trying to manage that current physiological demand inside the body. So therefore, their external function, executive function, will be kind of locked, and they might miss whatever, like punch, or they cannot hear what their coach saying, or they cannot like track opponent and respond quickly. So therefore, we're helping them to build that physiological component, elevate that, making sure they always can function optimally on a cognitive function. And there is another component, flexibility of every single energy system. This is how fast you can activate and, which is very important also, deactivate that system. Because if you always, and we have those fighters, you're focusing on, for example, high intensity anaerobic glycolytic type of work, always, you develop those adaptations. And what your body will be using first, easiest available adaptations. Exactly. So therefore, you start using those kind of mechanisms because they're available, but side effect, they're pretty expensive for the body. So you have to pay for that mechanism.
But those fighters are very fun to watch.
Yes. It's fun, yeah. So from performance point of view, we're trying to avoid when the fighter's like, oh, I cannot move my arms or legs, I cannot breathe, and so on. So we are focusing on each mechanism, power, efficiency, capacity, and flexibility around every energy system. And plus, we have this hybrid mode. I mentioned this before. When people saying, as an example, this is anaerobic glycolytic work, I'm saying that does not exist in real life. Why? We never use anaerobic glycolytic type of mechanism in isolation from aerobic system. More accurately, we have to say, yes, it's primarily that mechanism is involved, right? However, aerobic system is involved as well. It's just taking a bit longer period of time to activate that system. So I will give you example. We were getting in our 1 minute all-out maximal test in the lab. In about 40 seconds, VO2 peak is always above 90% of their VO2 max. So in around 40 seconds from the beginning of 1 minute all-out test. So it takes 40 seconds to bring your aerobic system from, let's say, baseline to 90% plus of your true VO2 max. We can actually pretty easily predict what your VO2 max will be based on that test. 40 seconds. So in first 20 seconds, obviously, anaerobic glycolytic mechanism is dominating. However, on the same time, on the background, aerobic system is involved in significant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is why it's kind of, I would say, difficult to say our energy systems on a global systematic level, they're working in isolation. They always interact. They're always working in hybrid mode. And you will be efficient fighter if you can develop that kind of hybrid mode interaction between those systems, and you can switch them depends on actual current demand during the fight.
Right.
Yeah, and why why you might get tired, even your VO2 max is high on the running, because as soon as you're in the fight, different functional systems with different physiological systems, like you're using different muscles, those muscles work in a different type of contractions, and energy systems, what we are using, will be working differently versus that test. This is why I mentioned that test is not sport specific. And
unless you're running away from your opponent. I mean,
no, this really good stuff, Roman. This is excellent. This did some valuable insights, and particularly just the fact that the best fighter is the one who can transition. Obviously, you want to increase the capacity and the efficiency of each, but we've known that, but not easy to do, right? Not easy to get a fighter to train each of those elements and have optimal performance at each level. And outside of that fighter being calm and relaxed, you can almost throw all of those energy systems out the window if they're too anxious, right? I mean,
exactly.
There's a whole mindset component to that too. So
exactly. And sometimes athletes, they didn't even start perform, but their heart rate is going up because of psychological component, as an example, right? So anticipation of fight is coming, or walkout, or like other things. So that system is already cardiac system and autonomic regulation of the heart is overloaded, overstimulated. It's working already close to like 100%. So it's not about efficiency anymore, because that system is gonna use all biological money and spend everything what you might have in your pocket. So therefore, I would say efficiency is a key for MMA fighters to perform and deliver expected result. They might have great power, but again, what about reproducibility? How many times you can reproduce that power with the same highest level? Exactly. If you are not efficient, if you cannot recover between those repetitions, so it will be 1, 2, 3 times, and oops. And so therefore, for coaches, it's very important to first understand what adaptations they're trying to build and develop in what systems, including energy systems. And it's not just about VO2 max, and definitely not. So it's about all systems in MMA.
Yeah, that's why training for the fight sports or combat sports is so complex. I mean, it's like you said, it's not like running on a treadmill. Put it this way. Runners, the way you test them is actually the way they train. So it's perfect for runners,
Exactly. It's a running specific. Yeah.
So I want to be respectful of your time. Just a couple more questions, and if Tony has any additional ones. Number one, from the time you came to the United States and worked with UFCPI, what do you think are the most meaningful changes in terms of use of technology for monitoring athletes? So that would be, let's say, over the last 20 years. And then the last one, this is more for the students that Tony and I teach. What career tips you have for young sports scientists who want to get into working with athletes? So first one, technology over the last 20 years.
On technological aspect, even 10 years ago, I would say 10 years ago, for example, when I was involved in developing technology for athletes, it was, we were struggling around connectivity between device and phone. And it was like, oh, I have to spend another 10 minutes, 15 minutes to reconnect my device and so on. So connectivity became much better. So therefore, as a user, it's like, hey, this is awesome. It's so great that technology kind of connect with the phone without bothering me, like minimizing certain distractions. Also, passive aspect around technology, like passive data collection. For example, there are smart rings you just put on a finger.
Right.
And like, hey, it's on my finger as my normal ring, and it's not bothering me at all in terms of asking some questions, or it's collecting data 24/7 automatically. This is amazing component that the less technology bother you, the better. And it was massive progress in the last 20 years, because before it was like, oh, nightmare, I would say, in terms of
Actually,
complexity.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that technology doesn't bother you. Sorry, Tony, to interrupt. Glucose monitoring devices. Is that anything? Is that of use?
That definitely bother you. It is invasive, still invasive, right? This component, I would say, I don't like much. If I will talk about consumer or athlete. So let's separate non-invasive, invasive, right? So that technology still needs improvement. It's supposed to be non-invasive, because I don't want to have needles or something like that inside me when I do training, sparring session, and so on. So no, absolutely not. Good call. I would say some technologies, not all. Also, how conclusions or recommendations currently coming from technologies in terms of interacting with me or with athletes. It's kind of, it allow us to use like natural human language to read these messages and interact like with humans. Which is also, it's not just like, oh, just number without providing like valuable information. So this is what I like. And obviously, because we're living in kind of in a big data era, and AI is with us, and like predictive analytics and so on. So definitely versus like beginning of 2000, we have much more valuable data and information that we can use, and technology actually use, just because they collected a massive amount of data. Big progress. However, I would say some of technologies, they still trying to dominate from engineering point of view. So engineers decide, okay, this is the trend for the future. For example, let's take virtual reality, and I can say whatever, Apple Vision Pro or whatever. It's like, hey, you have to live in virtual reality more and more and more. From my point of view, I completely disagree. I don't think it is a future, because we're still humans. We have biological, physiological
boards don't hit
functions.
back. So
I want to live. Yeah, I would say we have to move out from screens and use more kind of passive type of data collection versus being on a screen all the time or in virtual reality. So go outside in terms of like go on mountains, go on a bike outside, and use your 650 muscles and sensory systems, enjoy your life. So that doesn't mean that you should avoid completely technology. I'm talking just about how to filter those.
and career tips for young sports scientists.
Career tips.
Yeah.
I would say number one career tip, as we are living in a very interesting time where we use, and I'm example of that actually, multiple different competencies and pieces of expertise, like sports science. So many different puzzles are in these disciplines. How I'm making decision, I'm using physiology, biomechanics, I'm using nutrition, I'm using theory and methodology of training, I'm using my expertise as an athlete, and so on, data science, engineering, and so on. Try to first understand what competences, skills, knowledge you really need to become what you want to become. If you will become a sports scientist, you definitely need physiological disciplines for sure, right? Data science, sports engineering skills, and so on, and dive very deep on those. And I would say, I don't think you can become a sports scientist without understanding physiology. This is like,
It might help.
yeah. So take those classes for sure.
Hey,
We'll
Tony,
start with
any
that.
final
That's
thoughts
great.
for Roman? Any questions?
Just quickly, as you talked about connectivity. Well, I had connectivity issues, so I know the importance. So I got in late. I apologize. We definitely, Joey, we got to do a part 2 to this because this is outstanding. We got to have you back, Roman. This is fantastic. One thing that makes me happy is seeing the great work that you guys do. You know, I know the whole team, you work so hard, and I see more and more fighters embracing it. So that makes me really happy too. You guys, that should be your reward and your payoff. The other thing too, just in closing, I think we should have new fight categories of the night. The $50,000 bonus for the glycolytic fighter. All right, we'll have 25,000 for the aerobic fighter. I think you started a whole new category, Roman.
100%. I totally support that. That's
But
amazing.
no, this is fantastic. We appreciate your time, and I'd love to have you back because there's so much more we can dive into. It's great work you're doing, my friend.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, Tony. Thank you for invitation, Tony, and
I
excuse
want
me,
to mention,
Jose. Yep.
yeah, Roman, and I'll let Charles and Duncan know that we're hosting the ISSN NSU Fight Camp. Tony's one of the speakers, so I'm going to make sure you guys at least get the invitation. Whether or not you show up, that's okay. We're gonna have fun. I know Dr. Peacock will be bringing some of his fighters in as well as some other, because South Florida, as you're well aware, has a lot of some of the best coaches in the business. So it's October 19th. It's held on our campus. So Roman, if you happen to show up, you know, we'll treat you to a good sushi dinner, get you some beer. We'll have some fun. So
accepted, approved. Let's go.
Well,
Thank you so
Roman.
much.
Thanks for being on the Sports Science Dudes. Much appreciated. And
Thanks,
Tony,
Roman.
glad you could connect.